Hey Northside, this is Alan, College Life Minister, with your word for Wednesday. I don't know if you're like me, but I lose things often. Whether it's just something that's actually right in front of my face and I can't find it, or it's something that I've actually lost. This is no more apparent than when we try to put something together that we got online, maybe a piece of furniture or something that Bree has ordered, and it comes in and it's got all of these pieces and parts to it, and we get them scattered all across the living room, and I start putting them together. Sure enough, at some point in that process, a piece gets lost. And I'm pretty light on my toes in those situations. I don't get angry about it, but what I do tend to do is to just assume that the part that I lost wasn't really that important anyway. I'll say things like, well, I didn't need that part anyway, or that was just extra, or they throw in some extra pieces or whatever, and I just excuse it and be like, that was an inferior part. It's going to be a better piece of furniture without it anyway. In Luke chapter 15, Jesus gives these very famous parables about some things that get lost. He tells a story about a lost sheep, a lost coin, and a lost son, sometimes called the parable of the prodigal son. But in those stories, what I find very interesting is that Jesus uses something of value to describe something that's lost. So Jesus is just telling these parables, he's telling these stories. He could use anything in the world to describe these objects or this person that is lost. But he uses things of value in the story of the lost sheep. Even though the shepherd has 99 other sheep that didn't wander off, that this shepherd is so concerned for that one sheep because it has value. It has value to it. There's a price to be paid. It provides something in the flock. The story of the woman who lost her coin. You see, she had 10 silver coins and she lost one of them. You see, she's got another 9 coins that are not lost, but there is one that's missing. And for her, that is her number one concern because it has value. Jesus is placing value on these lost things. And in the famous story of the prodigal son, the youngest son, when the father has another son, frankly, a son who isn't wasting his inheritance, who isn't wasting his father's money, a son who is not lost, and the father has him there in his house. The father is not losing sleep or watching down the road every single morning to see if his oldest son is coming home, but his lost son. You see, to Jesus in these parables, lost things have value. And if you're a Christian, you might even catch yourself describing lost things in ways that devalue them. You know, in the church, we often talk about the lost people, those lost people out there. And it's like some outside group that we have to go save or that we have to go rescue. Some lower class of bad people, and they need to get their act together. And there's the lost and there's the found. And maybe if you're like me, you would catch yourself even thinking that you've never been in this lost category. You know, it's easy to describe ourselves as safe or found, or as, like the 99 sheep that never wandered outside of it. But it's very common for us to forget that, like the prophet Isaiah describes us, that we are all like the sheep that has gone astray, and that each of us has turned our own direction. This past Sunday, we continued our series, True Blue Believers, and looking at what it really means to be a Christ follower. And we talked about forgiveness this week. And the focus of the message was very simple. As forgiven people, we are dependent on forgiveness. We depend on the forgiveness that we get from the Father because our debt, that our sin has weighed on us, God has offered to remove that through his son, Jesus Christ. And so we are dependent on this. There's no other way out of this massive heap of debt that we have. But we don't just depend on forgiveness for ourselves. Now that we have received forgiveness, we saw in Matthew chapter 18 that we then become ambassadors of that forgiveness. But unlike the servant's response in Matthew chapter 18, who forgot his forgiveness immediately, forgiveness is something that we become proponents of. It is the flag that we wave every single day. It is the new team that we're on. And many of you know this about me, but I am a diehard Denver Broncos fan. And I've got the banners in my office to show it, right? Super Bowl 50 champs. Now, I understand this is Chiefs country or territory or whatever. And many of you are fans of the red and the yellow. I get that. And I've just learned to kind of live in a place as a hostile, contender. But many of you may not even remember when you became a fan of the team that you follow. Maybe for you, it was just the family that you were born into. It's like, because we're this family, this is what we watch on Sundays, and this is who we cheer for. For me, it makes a whole lot less sense than that, honestly. In our family, growing up, whoever's team made it to the Super Bowl or won whoever's team made it to the Super Bowl would get to pick the meal on Super Bowl Sunday. And so roughly 26 years ago, I picked a team that I thought had the best chance of me getting to eat on Super Bowl Sunday, chili Frito pie. So was I picking a team because I liked them? Yeah, it was going to be fun to watch a team, but I really wanted the chili Frito pie on Super Bowl Sunday. Well, they didn't win that year. 1996 was a rough year for the Broncos. They actually had a 13-3 season, which was great, but then they failed in the playoffs pretty miserably. But from that season on, I was hooked on the Broncos. And all these years later, if you come into my office, I still have the flag flying, the Broncos, in that. I fly it for my team. So even if we go 3-13, I'm still going to be waving that flag. And I've still had at least 3 chili Frito pie dinners since, just in case we're keeping count there. And I know that it's silly, but here's my point. Remembering your forgiveness, remembering the day not only you were forgiven from your sins, but that's also the day that you picked up the flag and you joined Team Forgiveness. Remembering the day that you became an ambassador for God's grace, a die-hard believer in forgiveness. Not because someone told you to, or because someone promised you a meal, or someone tricked you into it, but because you experienced grace for yourself in real life. I love the way that Paul writes in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 about our response to the grace and the forgiveness that's been given to you. I'm going to read it out of the Message translation. It says this. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 19. It says, all of this comes from God, who settled the relationship between us and him, then called us to settle our relationships with each other. God put the world square with himself through the Messiah, giving the world a fresh start by offering forgiveness of sins. But God has given us the task of telling everyone what he is doing. We are Christ's representatives. God uses us to persuade men and women to drop their differences and enter into God's work of making things right between them. Believers, forgiveness is the banner that we wave. It's the song that we sing. Forgiveness is now the team that we play for because we have experienced it and we are hooked. We believe in it. We're not the oldest son in the story of the prodigal son, sulking in the back room with our arms crossed while there's a party going on for the younger brother as he is forgiven. We are in the middle of the dance floor, celebrating that our brother and our sister who God has given value to was found. So church, this week, as we take care of one another and as we love one another, let's remember our forgiveness. Let's remember the value that Jesus put on lost things. And let's remember to forgive as we have been forgiven. So church, let's take care of one another this week and make sure you tune in tomorrow, which would be Thursday, to hear our children's minister, Tiffany. She's going to talk about covering our schools in prayer as our startup dates are fast approaching. So either online or in person, Northside, we will see you soon.